Hi everybody, this is Property with Leonard and welcome to another episode. Now on this channel, if you are new here, we discuss property, finance and investments. Now please note that none of my videos constitutes as financial advice, but if you are looking for financial advice, please speak to an accredited and registered financial advisor. Now you've clicked on this thumbnail, you've clicked on this video, maybe because the title of today's episode resonates with you. Now in addition to this property channel, I also have a motivational channel called Life with Leonard. And that channel is about improving people's lives by inspiring them to become the best version of themselves. Now, I spread love and peace and togetherness over there. However, in reality, things don't always go that way. You see, breakups and divorce, dirty tricks and games are everywhere. What I would like to explore with you in this episode is what happens to your property in the event of a divorce or a breakup. When your relationship ends, it's not the romance that should concern you when you set out. It's what might happen when the partnership ends. And in case you don't know, all partnerships, all of them ends, including marriages and romantic relationships. They do all end either because the parties decide to go their separate ways or because one partner dies. So it is inevitable. I've been accused numerous times of being cynical upon advising unmarried couples moving into a new home or when they buy together to draw up a domestic document wherein they outline each one's position, as people do when they enter into a marriage. Because, and that is the point here, without a written agreement, it is only too easy for one partner to disagree with the other on the value of their respective contributions and indeed to deny that they had an agreement at all. So in this episode, I want to focus on when you consider or are getting a divorce. You need to carefully consider what will happen should you divorce. Divorce is an emotional and very difficult time for all parties concerned, and the consequences, that is very important, of dealing with immovable property in particular could be farther reaching than the parties initially anticipated. Now, if you are contemplating a divorce, understanding the consequences of your matrimonial property regime is an essential first step in this whole process. It is best to cater in detail for the disposal and splitting of the parties of your assets by agreement at the time of divorce, because divorces in general are just expensive and time consuming and emotionally draining, as I mentioned. And when there are disagreements, it will only serve to reduce the value that each spouse will ultimately receive in terms of the divorce order. This is the unfortunate reality, everybody, that you need to take into account. In essence, buying property as a couple, buying it as a couple should be discussed carefully, and both parties should be able to gain out of the transaction at a later stage, because this needs to be put in writing as early as possible to avoid stressful complications later. Now, I'm a realist. I'm not playing devil's advocate here or just being pessimistic. However, what I will be sharing with you in this episode should form part of one's natural provisions and responses. The nature of your matrimonial property regime will determine how your assets will be divided in the event of a divorce, on which I would focus. In layman terms, there are three types of marriages. Now, most of us know this with reference to matrimonial property regimes that to choose from here in South Africa. They are marriage in community of property, and then also marriage out of community of property without the application of the accrual system. And then thirdly, marriage out of community of property with the application of the accrual system. So if you don't know how you are married, if you don't know, meaning where you fit into these three types of marriages, well, then you are more than likely married in community of property which is the default way of getting married here in South Africa, meaning there is no agreements. Basically, the point is that you just get married. If your marriage is in community of property, all assets belonging to you and your spouse prior to your marriage, plus of course, all assets that you accumulate during the subsistence of your marriage, that all form part of the joint estate. And this includes all debts incurred both before and during your marriage. If you should get divorced, the joint estate will effectively be divided equally between the two parties. It's important to bear in mind that both parties have full contractual freedom when it comes to negotiating and agreeing upon a divorce settlement. In the event of divorce with this type of marriage regime, you own half of the property. So in actual fact, you are entitled to 50% of the property or the mid proceeds of the property if it's going to be sold. You can of course prolong and or complicate things if you want to, and this often happens when it comes to divorces, for whatsoever reason. But a couple may choose to strictly enforce their matrimonial property regime when dividing their assets, or opt for a negotiated settlement that is more suited to their specific circumstances. The reality is all of this is much easier said than done, and if you've been in a similar situation or like me have experienced dealing with people going through it, the issue is, can you believe it? It's getting the parties to communicate after their marriage has broken down. It can be very challenging at best, and believe me when I say this. This is why employing the services of an experienced divorce mediator can be very effective in bringing both parties to the negotiation table and fleshing out a settlement agreement that is acceptable to each party. And as a professional mediator that has dealt, I am a professional mediator, I've dealt with these types of cases before, I would highly recommend that you opt for mediation first. If you need my assistance, I will leave my contact details in the description below. I also want you to bear in mind that if the spouses cannot reach a settlement agreement, the court can appoint a liquidator to divide the assets on behalf of the joint estate, which is never the ideal, trust me on that one. It's also important to note that divorce settlements does not just include the immovable property, because when it comes to retirement fund benefits, the non-member spouse will be entitled to claim 50% of the pension interest of the member spouse at the date of divorce. This is in terms of the clean break principle introduced in the Pension Fund Amendment Act. And secondly, you might wonder what will happen in the case of a marriage out of community of property with the accrual system. Now, where a couple is married out of community of property with the accrual system, each of the spouses keep a separate estate over which they have absolute control and independence. When the marriage come to an end as a result of a divorce, a claim comes into existence to a share of the accrual. The accrual is effectively, just to explain to you, the net increase in the value of each spouse's estate since the commencement of the marriage, meaning that the spouses share equally in the increase in the value of both of their estates while the marriage existed. Now, when it comes to calculating the accrual, very importantly, you must bear in mind that only the debt that each spouse incurred from the commencement of the marriage, only that debt is included in the accrual calculation. And on divorce, the net value of each spouse's commencement value at the date of marriage is deducted from the net value of each estate at the end of the marriage. This might sound a bit complicated to you, but it's really very simple. Bear in mind that certain assets are to be excluded when determining the accrual. This includes any assets expressly excluded in terms of the couple's antenuptial contract, which is pretty obvious, and any inheritance, legacy, trust, or donation received by the spouse from a third party during the marriage. Also excluded are any donations between spouses and any damages as a result of things like defamation or pain and suffering that accrued to a spouse. I hope you see what I meant when I said that it's not necessarily the romance that should concern you when you set out. It's what might happen when the partnership or the relationship or the marriage ends. And all partnerships, I just want to reiterate, or marriages, relationships, they all end either by separation or by divorce or death, but end they will. Next, let's talk about marriage out of community of property without the accrual before 1st November 1984. Now, in respect of spouses married out of community of property before 1st November 1984, each spouse retains their own separate estate and there is no sharing of assets. However, because those entering into marriage contracts prior to 1st November 1984 didn't have the option of the accrual system, the courts may consider a redistribution, let me put it in brackets, in the event of divorce. The court will also take into account the existing financial means and the obligations of each spouse and is required, of course, to use its discretion when contemplating a fair redistribution of assets. I also want you to bear in mind that a spouse's pension interest may form part of the redistribution order. Now, the marriage out of community without the accrual after 1st November 1984, where a couple is married out of community of property after 1st November 1984, they are deemed to have expressly excluded the accrual system, and as such, each spouse is deemed to keep a separate estate over which they have absolute control and, of course, independence. And there is no redistribution of assets upon or on divorce. In the event of a divorce, each spouse keeps their own estate plus all growth in their respective estate that occurred during the marriage, less any losses. Each spouse remains responsible for their own debt, and the other spouse cannot be held responsible at all. Just in conclusion, I just want to emphasize that it's important for you to consider all the options in relation to the marriage regime that you choose when deciding to marry your spouse, to eliminate, of course, future complications. Now, this might not be a very comfortable conversation to have, but it is absolutely necessary. You need to remain sane when buying together. Thank you so much, everybody. I sincerely hope that what I've shared with you today in this episode was of value to you. And if it was, can I kindly ask you, if you haven't, to please subscribe to my channel, to like this video, and to share it, and leave me a comment in the comment section below. And now, don't forget about our affiliate links. You will find it in the comment section below, and there's also a join button. How can I forget? A join button. Please, when you join our channel, you help us to grow and to continue to provide you with quality content. And yes, you are more than welcome. As I mentioned, all our affiliates are in the link below. And just before I go, subscribing to things. Firstly, it is absolutely free. It doesn't cost you a cent. And secondly, it is really easy. You can just click that subscriber button in the bottom right hand corner of your screen. And please remember to hit the all notifications, and that way you would be notified and you won't miss out whenever I upload new videos. Thank you so much, everybody. I see you in the next episode. Stay blessed.